I know that you yourself are not a doctor, and honestly, I would encourage anybody who is watching YouTube to maybe explore a little bit deeper on their own personal medical advice. But, that being said, and getting that out of the way, I think the criticism is going to be, isn't this just encouraging people to ruin their health by telling them to eat whatever they want and to be careless?
That is such a common misconception about this.
Sure.
I've heard people say oh, you're encouraging people to be fat. Oh, you're encouraging people to be unhealthy. That is not exactly what this movement is about at all.
And not the same thing, right?
Exactly. Yeah, no, not the same thing at all. A lot of people put weight and health together. They see fat people as being unhealthy and a number of other things, but that's not the case. So many people can be fat and healthy. So many people can be skinny and unhealthy. So weight does not equal whether or not you're healthy or not. And with this specific movement, it's not telling people, go get fat. It's not telling people just eat anything and everything you want. It's really just a awareness around understanding how fat bodies are in the environment and the world around us, how people see them, how medical providers treat them, and how people, really just end up a lot of shame and guilt around it and trying to get away from that.
Yeah, well, so then, again, without getting too deep into the medical aspects of it, what can we say about the connection between health and weight?
Oh, goodness. So, obviously, again, I'm not a doctor, but if you do some research about just kind of the medical field in general, you see that there's been quite a bit of studies and education around weight, but specifically weight for skinny white people. That's where the textbooks have gone. That's what we've studied. That's what we've kind of based everything
What
on.
everything has been normed off of is this very specific population.
Exactly. And so therefore, because of that, we see people who are in fat bodies, people of color, people who are all different shapes and sizes are then automatically deemed as unhealthy because they don't fit into this kind of stereotypical ideal body type that they've been studying for so long. And so that's why we really start to have a lot of the issues around, weight loss and, shame and guilt and whatnot because of it. But yeah, that's kind of because of that historical understanding of weight. That's what we continue to see today and what doctors still use. And that's why we see such a problem. And that's why everybody says fat equals unhealthy.
Right. And it's, probably goes without saying, but as therapists, we really do have to kind of say the quiet part out loud to point out that shame that so many people experience is, if nothing else, a huge barrier to changing your weight or to just managing your health in general.
Oh, 100%. I'm constantly having to talk about, once we get to a place of working towards fat liberation, which we're going to talk about, why society has created these labels and how these labels are just so harmful to us. It does more damage than it does good.
Sure. Well, I mean, frankly, I know that there are a lot of folks who are going to drop out of this conversation right now and just run to the comments section to declare all of this like some sort of scientific fraud. What can you say about the sort of moralizing, judgmental fervor, honestly, that comes around weight and how we talk about it in our culture?
Oh, my goodness. When it comes to that, what I think of are just a number of different things. When we hear doctors talk about weight loss all the time, and that also just go into other environments as well, then people really start to feel shame. People don't want to change then. We see people giving up power, people trying to take power from people and continue to oppress fat people. We see a lot happen to a person's psyche, their body, the way that they view their life, the way that they view relationships. I mean, it's literally just a spiral of things that end up happening. And as a therapist, that's something that, I have to face not only how the individual sees it and how the individual is going about their life, but then also how society is doing it as well.
Yeah.
Because not only do we have to help the individual, but as therapists, we have to work and help society.
Yeah. So it's in a lot of ways not the case that being fat in and of itself is harmful to your health for many, many people. but that being a fat person in this culture can then be really problematic for your health.
Exactly. It's the culture which is extremely toxic to fat people.
Why do you think there is such like vitriol? We don't necessarily we might kind of thumb our noses at somebody who is like smoking outside of a bar, and we like to get judgy on everything that we can, but there is something about fat folks that really does seem to draw a lot of ire.
Yeah, I think that's because in society we've put on a pedestal what we should look like. You need to be tall, skinny. For a female presenting body, tall, skinny, you need to have curves. That is what's desirable. That is what's healthy looking. For people who present as men, you have to have that upside down triangle build. You have to be very manly. You have to be the right size, etc. And because of that, and we see that not only in the medical field, we see that in entertainment, we see that in sports, we see that in fashion, we see it everywhere. That message is then ingrained into us and says yo, you can't be anything else but, and if you are anything else but this, you're not desirable, you're not wanted, you're not lovable, etc.
Yeah, so unlovable very quickly turns into some need to have an explanation, because we don't feel good about just hating people for no reason. So we kind of create this moralizing panic about, well, I'm concerned for your health.
Right. Exactly. And people think that, if they take that route of, I'm just really concerned about your health. Well, it's not really about your health, because what they're saying is that you, the person, because of your size, again, not desirable, it's unhealthy, et cetera.
Yeah. I mean, it's worth pointing out that you can't judge somebody's health and well-being just by looking at them, and yet we really do make that assumption. I mean, fat people face a lot of discrimination in our culture. Can you talk to us at all about the pressure that comes from that more well-meaning, health and safety kind of lens?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I mean, myself as a fat person, this is something that I've had to deal with all throughout my life, something I continue to deal with and continue to work on. And so, when I'm going about my life every single day, I'm constantly reminded of these things. Everywhere I look, books, magazines, movies, music, fashion, who knows? I'm constantly told and shown, this is what you need to look like. And if I don't look like this, then this is what you're, not wanted and whatnot. So yeah, it gets really difficult. And then as a therapist, being able to hold space for my clients, as well as understanding how I've gone through it myself and I continue to go through it, really makes a big difference for the work that I do.
Yeah, well, I mean, we did an episode a couple of years back called, Yes, We Said Fat. But, I think we've already used that word some 15 or 20 times in the last 15 minutes. So in case anyone who's listening is a little bit uncomfortable, can you talk about what is destigmatizing, what is healthy and appropriate language on this topic?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to kind of start with another example. So I openly identify as a queer, fat, Mexican-American, and a number of other things. But when I use the word queer, a lot of people have a tendency to kind of,
Sure. Yeah. It's been used as a slur for a lot of folks.
When I was younger and I was coming to terms with my sexuality, queer was constantly used in a negative way to hurt people. And so over time, what has happened is in the LGBTQ plus community, we have taken that word back as a sense of power, as a sense of identity, as a sense of authenticity. And so with taking that word back and using it in more of the positive light instead of a derogatory, discriminatory way, it's really changed how people start to see the queer community, how people interact and talk with the queer community. Same thing with the word fat. I've been called fat all my life in a very derogatory, discriminatory way. And let me tell you, that hits you, right? It hits you hard. But then when I started taking that word back and saying, fat is just a descriptor, right? Fat is not, it doesn't mean anything else but describing what my body looks like. that really changes my lens and the way that I view that word. And then when people use it against me, it doesn't hurt me as much. But that's also because of the journey that I've been on, the work that I've done for myself.
Yeah.
Not everybody is where I am, but everybody is on a journey. And so I think that by taking that word back and using it in more of a positive light as a descriptor, not using it in a negative, discriminatory way, it really starts to change the way people see it, both who identify as fat and who are not.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's telling, isn't it? Like the
Yes.
way we as a society think about that term. Because if we were to say like, oh, she's standing over there next to the tall guy, next to the short guy, then if we say something like next to the black guy or next to the Mexican guy, some of us start to feel a little uncomfortable because we've used that term in such a negative way.
Exactly.
And so to then say, oh, well, she's standing next to the fat guy, that opens up a whole uncomfortable can of worms for so many of us.
Oh, it really does. And I mean, the fact that language has been used in such a targeting way to hurt people, whereas we can take language back and use it in such a positive light, in such an affirming and validating way, then people start to change the way that they use it. Maybe not everybody, but a lot of people start to then feel really just more authentically themselves, and they feel okay with those words. It doesn't take their power away. It doesn't take who they are away.
Yeah. Well, so can you talk to me a little bit about some of these like more maybe medicalized terms? I mean, when we say things like obese and, that term morbidly obese, I don't know if you want to talk about BMI and some of the junk science there, but how should we as a culture be thinking about these more like medical-ish terms?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I myself am considered morbidly obese. My BMI is, I don't know, like 50% or something like that. But that in and of itself does not decide or is an indicator of my health. I'm still a healthy person. BMI in and of itself, when it comes to the way that doctors have been using it, is again, they've used it for to understand a platform of like, this is for white, skinny people. This is what BMI, quote unquote, should look like. And this is what deems a person to be healthy. Because it's only been used and started off with, tall, skinny white people, it doesn't really go into understanding people who have different ethnicities, different cultures, people's they're different, words all of a sudden. Their genetics and like things like that, right?
Sure, yeah.
And so BMI is really just a simple way to just say you're fat and unhealthy. Like it doesn't give anything else in terms of an actual person's diagnosis, what their ailments are or anything like that. It's just kind of a shaming thing to do most of the time.
Yeah, and I mean, on a certain level, that almost feels like it ought to be obvious, because if you
Right.
were trying to reduce anything in the, health and human sciences down to one specific number, one particular measurement, and we try to say, well, this is the data point that now defines everything, you're always going to get into trouble.
Exactly.
I mean, it's why, like, we as therapists used to use that idea of a GAF score, a global assessment of functioning, and try and reduce people's like health and wellness down to a singular number. And that's just never going to work. Like, human beings aren't data points. And so there's so much work to be done on addressing the whole person and looking at people as people rather than like some singular metric.
Oh, absolutely. And how can we say that like that one data point applies to everybody?
Sure, yeah.
There's nobody who's the same. Even a tall, skinny white person, not two people are the same. Looking at genetics, looking at their lifestyle, environment. I mean, just so many different factors play into that. We can't say one set of data applies for everybody. That's bullshit. It doesn't work. And the fact that it is still continuously used today just goes to show that it's a power play to keep oppressed people oppressed so that they will, do anything and everything from the diets and the exercising and all these things that can be very unhealthy for them because of the way that they are shamed about it.
Right, right. So then a lot of the work that needs to be done here is not just that like typical, therapist-y thing that we do of like love yourself. It's actually about dispelling those bogus cultural assumptions and really talking about the larger picture about how we as a society conceptualize weight. Can you talk to us a little bit about the fat liberation movement and how that plays into all of this?
Absolutely. I love the fat liberation movement because it's doing exactly that. It is trying to dispel these things that we've been told for so long. What's really cool about the fat liberation movement is the fat liberation movement actually came from the body positive movement, which came from the feminist movement. So the feminist movement.
Yeah, thank you. Walk us through that chain of logic.
I know. Everybody's probably going, wait, what? Tell me a little bit more about that. So with the feminist movement, that was really geared towards, helping women be seen, be heard, get to this place of equality through a number of different ways. It started with women, then it really, really moved out to like LGBTQ plus, BIPOC individuals, and other marginalized communities. With that movement geared towards really trying to fight for equality and so forth, it really found that people of different body sizes were also constantly being oppressed as well. And so it kind of just was like, we're mama, we're going to take you under our wing and we're going to take care of you because we want people to see you and to be validated, to be heard, to be advocated for, and for people to say, hey, like, your body is just as good as anybody else's body. So with the body positivity movement, this is really geared towards the, self-love, the positive talking, the, accepting your body for as it is.
There's no way you should look.
Exactly.
You should look like you, and that's beautiful in its own right.
Right. Whether you're skinny, fat, or anywhere in between, you are beautiful just the way you are, which I absolutely love. I think that's a very important message that we need to start from a very young age and throughout the rest of our life. However, that's not enough. We can sit there and we can work with clients about loving themselves, their bodies, the way that their bodies interact with the world and so forth. But things are not going to change unless we change the system.
Okay, so your body is beautiful isn't a sufficient message when you have all of these like large scale and culturally spread forms of oppression.
Exactly. We can do things on a micro scale and really, really help the individual. But if we could do things on that macro scale and really change the system, the culture, the views, then we don't have to keep doing the body positivity stuff.
Fair to say.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's why fat liberation is really kind of this newer wave of education, advocacy work, fighting in places like the medical field for people to change their data set points and to understand that there's so many different factors to take into consideration that affects a person's body size. And that's why we see fat liberation as a really big thing right now with millennial, Gen Zers, and people who are saying, like, enough is enough, right? We're not going to keep doing this anymore.
Well, I mean, it turns out when you allow people growing up to see more than just, like, straight, white, cis-het couples on TV, that they begin to get some ideas about how it's okay to be you.
Exactly. I mean, I can remember growing up myself and never really seeing a fat queer person on TV, magazines, movies, or anything like that.
If there is a fat person, they're the sidekick and they're the butt of the joke.
Exactly. And that's not fair or right. A fat person should not be made fun of just because of their size at all. Like, that's not what we're here about. That's shaming. That is judgmental. And it really hurts a person and does way more damage to them than a lot of people realize.
Yeah. Well, so then what are some of the, like, bigger systemic oppression kind of things? We've talked a little bit about like medical access. Clearly there is social pressure and peer judgment, but what are those like less interpersonal and more systemic oppressors that we should be thinking about?
Yeah, so you actually see fat oppression happen in so many different fields. For example, just employment. I'm really bad with statistics, y'all. I'm not good with numbers, but I can tell you, if you go and look at the studies and you see fat oppression, you actually see higher rates of fat people in work who are actually getting passed over for raises, for mobility of movement up in the company. You actually see a lot of more skinnier people who are put in front of the camera or the pictures or
Sure.
advertising and things like that because it's more quote unquote appealing. And just think about what that does to the work environment and what it does to fat people there. It says you're never going to be good enough.
Yeah.
So we see that in employment. We also see this in fashion. Fashion models are always tall and skinny. We never see a full-figured fat person. And because that's something that is so commonly seen in social media, TV, music, movies, and so forth, we're surrounded by it. That message is constantly saying, you're not enough. You can't be more than, a person sitting at a desk. You could never be a model because you're not pretty enough.
Right.
Yeah. Let's see, where else do we see it? Clothing, oh my goodness. As a fat person, I hate shopping because finding clothes that fit me, one, they're never cute. I can never find any cute shit to wear. Two, it's expensive. Buying an extra large, double XL, 5XL shirt or something like that, you're always tacking on $2, $3, $4 extra dollars for it. When if you really look at how much it costs to make those things, it's cents. So why are we charging fat body people more money when you charge skinny body people less money for clothes?
Yeah, so it's something like the pink tax. Like if something is directly marketed towards women, we will jack the price up on it because what are they going to do about it?
Exactly. And so you see this happen all over the place. And again, it's very shaming. I know I have felt extremely uncomfortable shopping in person, trying to ask somebody for my size pants, my size shirt, or anything like that. And the looks that I get, oh my goodness, if looks could kill, let me tell you. And not just from, clientele who are shopping there, but from the workers as well.
Yeah.
And so being able to remove that type of stigma in the fashion, clothes industry can really help improve people's self-esteem, self-worth, self-value.
Do you feel like we are making any movement in that direction? I mean, it seems like every 3 or 6 months you'll see some big news story about how, Victoria's Secret hired a plus-size model, and everybody gets all excited about it. Is that just like the way we sort of rainbow color all of the corporations every summer, or does that feel like meaningful progress?
It depends on who you ask.
Sure, fair to say, yeah.
I do believe that we are making good strides. Good strides are going to be slow. I don't think that we're going to have overnight changes. I do love seeing, different companies who take on and have models who are of all body shapes, all colors and so forth be represented because it's very empowering. Is that everywhere? Absolutely not.
Sure.
We've got a lot more to do, but I think there is a slow progression. I think what's important are therapists, are social workers, are people who are spreading education and advocacy around fat liberation to continue to make those changes.
Yeah. I mean, this very much is a cultural problem.
100%.
I think people so often attribute to genetics or to evolution these things that are not necessarily ingrained, but that are rather culturally constructed. I can just imagine people watching this saying, well, we evolved to think that this particular body type was going to be the most fertile and therefore the most attractive. But I don't really feel like that holds up when we start looking at various cultures. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. I mean, let me tell you, I can't tell you how much, outside of the U.S. alone, we see, fat bodies as very much put on a pedestal, right? Fat bodies are seen as beautiful, as fertile, as, something to, look forward to and to enjoy and celebrate. Whereas here in the U.S., not so much. And because of the things of people's culture, society, social media, and whatnot, it continues to downplay things like that and really, really continue to stress that tall, skinny is what's the best.
Yeah, tall, skinny, white European. I mean,
Yes, exactly.
It all gets folded into that same like kind of colonialist notion.
Mm-hmm. Oh, 100%. Exactly. And to be able to make those changes, as we're talking about, we need people who are doing the fat liberation work in all aspects. Not just what we're talking about, like medical, movies, fashion, etc., but even when it comes to things like legal, making sure that people are not being fired for just being fat.
Sure, yeah.
Right? I mean, in the state of Texas, for the longest time, you could be fired for just being gay, and they don't have to give you any cause or any reason, right? Mm-hmm. Same thing. Like, there's not protections for fat people. Somebody could just fire me just because. And that's not right.